Thank you for tuning in to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. You're listening to Awesomeness in Action. I'm your host, your girl, Raushawna Price, giver of awesomeness, international author, coach, and speaker. This show is sponsored by Erie Success. Erie Success helps organizations to soar above their competition by helping them find solutions, opportunities, bring awareness and results to every problem that they have. Today, we have a special guest here that is all the way from the organization Safe Passage. Joan Harris is the Associate Director of Advocacy and the Community Service with Safe Passage. So before I give a formal introduction of Joan, I have to say that I'm so glad that she is here. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. We met under some pretty tough circumstances that we're going to talk about in a little bit. So I want people to know that so they can settle into their chairs if they're listening. If you're watching this, if you're going to be listening and you're doing a walk, just settle in. This is the conversation that we're going to have that's honest and real about a topic that is very near and dear to both of us, and it is domestic violence. Let me tell you more about Safe Passage and Joan. So Safe Passage Incorporated is a nonprofit organization that assists survivors of domestic violence, sexual trauma, and child abuse. So Joan, prior to accepting this position at Safe Passage, she served as the coordinator of victim services for Winthrop University. In her role at the university, she served as the survivors of campus assault and assisted with the Title 5 or 6?
Title 9.
Title 9. See, look, she's going to educate me on that. Title 9 related investigations and hearings. So Joan was previously the legal victim advocate and for Safe Passage for a year in that position, and she assisted clients with court preparation, restraining orders, and other orders of protection. So Joan has held the position as a sexual trauma services coordinator and the sexual violence prevention educator with Safe Passage Incorporated. If you've been listening, you know that she's an expert because she's been doing this a long time. So prior to working with Safe Passage, Joan attended the University of South Carolina, where she studied criminology and criminal justice. Joan received her Master's of Arts degree in criminal justice from Arizona State University in 2015. Her passion for advocating for children led her to becoming the South Carolina Guardian ad litem in 2015. So Joan, after this, I'm totally putting her on the spot right now. I'm a part of the board of Fostering the Family, which is another nonprofit that supports children and churches that are supporting fostering families. So during her time at the University of South Carolina, she was an intern at the Sexual Trauma Services of the Midlands in Columbia, where she worked as a sexual assault victims advocate, responded to hotlines, hospital accommodations calls, biweekly issues, and more. So Joan, I'm glad to have you here on the Awesomeness in Action radio show. Yes, your bio is extensive and it's exciting because you fill the gap for people that need support, that are looking for opportunities because they need help getting out of a situation. Is that a fair way to describe what you do?
Yeah, I think that the main thing that I do is that I work to empower people, through this work. So I work with people who experience some type of interpersonal violence, and then my goal is to try to empower them after that.
Wow, it's powerful and it's personal. So we're going to talk a little bit about the personal story. So you and I share a love for a woman who is no longer here. Those of you who know and follow me online, you know that my dear friend, Cherie Johnson, passed away in April of this year due to domestic violence. And that was very tragic. And Joan was right there in the midst, helping all along the way. And that's how we got connected. one of the things when I first met you, and even before I met you, when in the midst of it all, when I was talking with Cherie, she said, I have support. I have some people that are trying to help me. What is one of the main things that you do and that Safe Passage does to help those that find themselves in the midst of it or in the middle of it?
So I would say that the main thing that we do is try and provide people with safety planning. A lot of people may not understand that if someone is experiencing domestic violence, leaving is the most dangerous option that that person can take of the options. And when someone is ready to leave, we try our best to do safety planning with them so that when they are ready to leave, it can be a safer situation instead of them just upping and leaving. Most domestic violence murders take place after the victim has left the perpetrator. And that is within weeks, months, even years after they've left that person that they can experience femicide. And so that's why that's a very important thing that we do. So safety planning is, I would say, number one.
And you just said a word that I don't know. Femicide? Is that what you said?
Femicide, the murder of women.
Oh, okay.
And domestic violence, of course, applies to men as well. But we do see, as far as domestic violence figures for statistics, we see that women are more likely the victims, and they are more likely the ones to be murdered. Even more so, in talking about people of color, Black women, I'm a Black woman, you're a Black woman, we seem to be murdered most often in those situations, and usually with a weapon, typically guns.
Wow. So we've talked a lot. However, these statistics, I did not know. I knew that the investigation and all the things that happened were a part of trends and stats. However, to know that I had a friend who was a statistic, a part of the numbers, and you see that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis.
Yes, we unfortunately see this happen a lot. I will say that it has not been easy for domestic violence victims this year. We don't have a large space here, and in York County alone, we've had 5 to 6 domestic violence related murders in 2020, which is a lot. That's a lot. It's someone's friend, someone's mom, someone's daughter. It's horrific.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it disrupts a whole community for a lifetime.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you said that too, Raushawna, because often people think about domestic violence being something that happens in a person's home, like it's a private issue. But domestic violence is an issue that impacts the entire community. Your entire community pays when something like this happens. You're going to pay, whether you're going to pay for the coroner's office to come out, you're going to pay for the police officers to respond, you're going to pay for whatever care those people need after having to go into a situation like that. And you're going to be paying for the follow-up for what happens with that family afterwards, which is often nothing great.
Right. So there's the fiscal impact, there is the social impact, the emotional, spiritual. It reverberates, like it's a vibration that exists in community.
Absolutely.
Members of the communities. I can
Absolutely.
definitely, that is personal, that resonates very much so. Domestic violence is one of the things, it's like I would say like a secret for the theys and the thems. It's people, it doesn't happen in our community, it doesn't happen in our neighborhood, or it happens to those people when it could be happening right across the street, as in my case. Can you share more about
Absolutely.
how domestic violence can feel almost separated from society, or anything else you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think that I'm glad that what you brought up, Raushawna, is that domestic violence is likely happening right beside people and they have no idea. It doesn't matter where you live, what your socioeconomic status is, doesn't matter where we went to school. That does not matter with domestic violence. There are professionals who experience domestic violence. There are your essential workers that experience domestic violence. There are those without a home at all that experience domestic violence. It does not discriminate at all. And I think that even in the context of what we're talking about today, one of my favorite topics with domestic violence often is around Black women, because I am a Black woman. And even you can see in different communities how people respond to the issue of domestic violence. Most of the time, it is something that if people see it going on, they turn their head the other way and act like they didn't see it. They act like they don't, they'll say, I don't want to get involved. That's not my business. And they don't think about the long-term impact that can have, because you turning your head could have been an opportunity for someone to get out of that situation, could be an opportunity for someone to come out of that home alive. And we don't think about it in that context because people just think it's not for them. And like you said, it's like them over there, those people that are dealing with this. No, it's everywhere. It happens all the time. And you just simply don't know about it. And when people do find out about it, the other part of that is people begin to take sides of like, who did, was the person provoked and this and that. At the end of the day, you as a woman, me as a woman, we deserve to be in a relationship where we are loved and respected. No matter what I say or do, it should not result in someone physically harming me or someone emotionally harming me. There's nothing that should result to that. That should not be what happens because two people are upset. And I think that those things people don't think about as much, and they truly do impact the way that a victim operates, how they come forward. If they come forward, they see these things and they're like, I don't know. If I see on the news, that domestic violence situation happened and they talk to the neighbors and the neighbors are always like, oh, I would have never thought that. These were the best people, this and that. That actually is kind of discouraging for another victim, because it's like, well, who's going to believe me? You didn't believe them and they were like right beside you and you said you had a relationship, with that family. Who's going to believe me when I come forward?
Right.
I think that in general, we should just think about it as something that if someone says it happened, it likely happened. You gain nothing by going to the police and saying, hey, I've been assaulted in this way. You gain zero from doing that. So the likelihood of someone making a false claim like that is very low.
Very low. Yeah. Most of the time, to even get the courage to come forward
Right.
is in and of itself a feat. It is like climbing to the top of a mountain. And then once you say something, you still have more mountains to climb. Because
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean, a couple of things that I've seen, and Joan, I want to make sure that we give listeners some specific signs and some things. So
Okay.
I'll walk you through a couple of things that I experienced in watching a situation unfold. And then you tell me if these are things that are consistent or if they're abnormal. So one of
Okay.
the things is a facade of living, almost like two different types of people. So you know that there is something else. Like for me watching, I was like, there's something. I can't quite put my finger on it. It's an intuition. Do you have people that come forward later having said those kinds of things?
Yes, most victims will even say that the perpetrators are like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, like they are one person at home, another person in public, and that it can be really difficult for them to say something or to even get the courage to say something because people do not see the perpetrator in that same light. Things that we know about perpetrators is that they're typically very charismatic, very charming people that tend to have the ability to like make friends and be jolly, but they have this other side to them that you may not see. You also talked about like some early signs too,
Yes.
before, and one of the one of the early signs that people may not think about is any people who get into a serious relationship very quickly
Oh, say
is
more about that.
big. That
Like,
is a big red flag. Within a month of dating, they've moved in together. They're cohabitating. They're talking about the future, talking about getting married and things like that. In a month,
okay,
in a
okay,
month, you don't know the person.
okay.
You don't know them. That's a huge red flag. Most perpetrators, that's how they date too. They're in and out of relationships. And when they're in a relationship with this person, they're probably abusing them and still on the prowl for their next relationship.
Okay, so perpetrators can be serial relationship people, or they're pressuring the person to like move quickly.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. I've also seen and heard there's a control factor around money, around work, those kinds of things. Tell us
Yeah,
more about that.
that's
Is that a
definitely
sign, or
accurate.
is that something that?
Oh, that's definitely a huge red flag. They tend to be controlling. Initially, a victim might think, well, these things might not matter that much, that the person doesn't want me to hang around other men, or that they don't want me, going to the bar by myself. They want to be with me. And initially they may think these things might just be normal of a relationship, but it always continues in escalation. Then it's they don't want you to go anywhere. You can't talk to your family. When you talk to your family, it's a problem. What you wear is a problem. How you spend money is a problem. Usually not a problem for them, I will say. They will spend like there's no tomorrow, or do whatever they want with the money, but for the victim, it's very controlled. I've even had victims who had perpetrators that did not work. Victim comes home, gives all of their money to the perpetrator, and then they have to ask for money to buy groceries, to buy feminine hygiene products, which really like burns me up. But yeah, that controlling aspect is definitely there.
Yeah. And you're talking very specific. These are behaviors that anyone that's listening can start to pay attention to. And maybe a listener is like, oh my goodness, it hasn't escalated necessarily to physical violence
Hmm.
yet. Maybe it's verbal abuse that starts, and then, or maybe it is just the control factor and what I would call almost a setup. It, for anybody who plays chess, that's kind of the analogy that I used when I was going through the process to heal from my friend. It was almost like a chess game of positioning and creating over time less and less options
Yep.
for my friend.
Oh yeah, I would say that that is a great analogy to use. It gets the people backed into a play, into almost like a corner where they look around and they got nobody. They've got no one to help them. They've burned every bridge there is. They can't call on family. They can't call on friends. And all they have is this person that is not treating them well.
Mhm.
And that's the sole person that they're relying on. And the perpetrator's like, yay, got them where I wanted them, where they're totally reliant upon that person.
Mhm. Mhm. They're in such isolation,
Yep.
and the belief is, where else would you go? No one
Hmm.
else wants you. No one else no one's going to take care of you like I do, or yeah.
Absolutely. Those are the things, things that they'll say to the victims. And I would say, think about too, like sometimes that with the isolation comes that the people will move around. And then if you're moving around, you don't really have that great of a connection with the neighbors, with the community that you might if you were, somewhere where you grew up before, where you knew people, where your family was. And so that does make a difference as well. As does the victim have the ability to see other people, You know, is there someone that's going to be checking on them and being like, something doesn't seem right here? But if they're, you know, they just moved into your neighborhood 6 months ago, you don't really know anything about them. So you wouldn't know if these things are normal or not, that you don't see her coming out of the house, you know? So that does make a difference.
Man, Joan, I'm like, yes, so many signs, and
Hmm.
witnessed those signs of like, it's odd. Like we had plans to hang out and then all of a sudden she can't go. Like that's just like weird. Who does that?
Right. Yeah, they can't really, the perpetrators don't really allow them to build that support system. They don't allow them to build this community of people around them. And it makes the victim feel stuck. They feel like they don't have another choice.
Mhm.
Even though we on the outside might be looking in saying like, girl, get out of there. You know, you don't deserve to be treated like this. Think about if this is all you have is that person.
Mhm.
You know, those people, the people that I work with, they don't know me. Like they just met me. I can tell them these encouraging things and try to inspire them in that moment, but the truth is they don't know me, but who they do know is that perpetrator.
Mhm.
And there is still some level of comfort with what you know opposed to what you don't know. And they don't know what the outcome's going to be working with an agency like Safe Passage. They don't know how that might work, but they do know that they might be able to stick it out at home. They know what's going to happen.
Yeah, they have, at least it's a comfort zone. It might not be comfortable, but it is still a
Right.
comfort zone. And one of the things that I want us to talk about, because I know my friend well enough to know that she would want me to share and help as many people as possible. When she came back home after being away, and we sat and talked, and she for the first time revealed to me like, this has happened and this is the full story. And I asked her, why have you stayed so long? And she said, I don't know. And I said, what hope do you have? And she said, I hoped it would get better. I hoped it would get better. And that sticks with me. It's with me daily. And I want us to talk about the hope that people have that it'll get better.
So, remember earlier I was saying that the perpetrators often get into serious relationships very quickly. So, they are often like the ideal partner for that first month or two. And as things get worse and worse, what the victims typically hold on to is that tiny little bit of hope that the person's going to be like they were in the very beginning. The people do not start these relationships punching someone, okay? Because you're going to leave. If on day one, if on a first date, I come in and sock you, you are never going on another date with me,
Absolutely.
period.
Right.
Right? But that's not how it works. It is a wonderful relationship at the beginning. Little by little, the perpetrator begins to take things from that person, to take away their self esteem, most of all, their
Mhm.
self worth. And over time, that person, they recognize, like, I don't like this. No one does. No one wants to be treated poorly in a relationship. But they're like, the person wasn't like this. This isn't who I met. This isn't who I decided to be with. It's not that person. And the perpetrator is likely saying things like that they're going to change, that they won't repeat those bad behaviors again. And
Mhm.
they have that hope that the person is going to be like that again. There's an analogy that I like sometimes, and I think about it like when you taste like a pie that your grandmother made, but
Mhm.
you try and recreate it at home yourself.
Oh,
And if anyone has ever tried this, they know that I don't care how you follow a recipe to the T, you don't actually really get grandma's cooking. You try, but it's like you just can't get there. But
yes.
does that stop you from trying? Not really. No, it usually
No,
doesn't. Like you keep on trying
you
to
do.
get back to that taste, and really it's just like the nostalgia,
Okay.
because if you're following her recipe, it's probably the exact same thing, but it was a different feeling when you ate it with grandma. It was a different feeling when you were at grandma's house eating that piece of pie than it is with you slaving over the stove in your own kitchen and trying to put it together. It
Yeah.
just don't have the same sweat and tears in it, you know?
Doesn't, and you have to wash all the dishes afterwards. And
Right. It is not the same, but people do not give up on trying it. And like every year Thanksgiving, they'll try to, do it again, or, they'll keep trying those recipes until they can figure out how to get it right. There's a piece of it, something there, that nostalgia there that you're like holding on to hope of getting back to that. And I kind of liken that to what the victims might be feeling in that relationship. It's that tiny piece of paradise.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, if I can get back there. And some days they do, because the person's not bad 24/7, right? So some days you do get back to that piece, and it's like, this is what I was looking for. This is what was hoping. This is what I was hoping this was going to be, but it just doesn't last.
It doesn't last. Yeah, it's the hope. I say hope isn't a strategy, because ultimately after the hope, there has to be the exploration and a choice. Has to be. And that's the difference. And so as I've been listening, and for those that are listening, watching someone from the outside, what I learned is that you have to reserve all judgment. Because what you think someone's going to do, how they're going to respond, what their next move is going to be, unless you're that person and you're in it, you have no idea. You have no idea. And
You're
so,
absolutely right.
yeah. And grace is really the only thing that we can offer anyone that is a victim in it, and even the perpetrator, because the perpetrators are in their own process of hurt. They have something that got them to be that way. And the victims also are in that situation where they're hurt, and hurting people hurt people. That's how it happens. And that's why it continues.
I can't disagree with you there. I do think that there is some background to why people believe that these relationships are okay. My own opinion on it is that I think that many of us, myself included, were not taught how to have a healthy relationship growing up. That's not something that we're taught. And so you look at what the examples are around you in your home or on television, and you think that that's what a healthy relationship is supposed to be. But that isn't necessarily what it actually looks like.
Yeah, we're all mimicking something. And if your
Right.
picture was, and I know for the perpetrator in my friend's life, that there was background, that there was a different story. And so it doesn't excuse it. It doesn't make it better. It's an understanding. And ultimately, that's why we're here, is to create more understanding. Right after the break, we are going to finish up our conversation by giving people opportunities to understand a little bit more about Safe Passage, how they can get involved, how they can donate. So stay tuned right after the break. You're listening to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station that gives you double the information and inspiration. We'll be right back. So I had to take one more break.
Okay.
This is so good. Oh my goodness.
Yay, success.
Yes. Yeah, I feel like Sharia's like, yes. Like she was standing at the door one day telling me how she wanted to leave her job and wanted to do something to help women. I was like, well, let's talk about it. Let's do it. And she was like, no. Like, I think she knew, like, this was before I knew everything. I was like, no. And she was like, absolutely no.
Many people actually get into this field because they have something, in their background that makes them want to try and help people. Maybe they grew up, with domestic violence happening in their home, and they set out to try and change that for other people. That is not always successful because they typically haven't gotten the help for themselves, but many of them do come into this field with some type of background.
It's totally changed my life. Miss Valerie will be on the show after yours on October 10th.
Yay! How is she doing? I was trying to call her the other day. First of all, I can't find her number. I can't.
Welcome back to WDRB Media, the voice of the community. You are watching. I'll start again. Welcome back to WDRB Media, the voice of the community. You are listening to Awesomeness in Action with your host, Raushawna Price, giver of awesomeness. I am here with Joan Harris from Safe Passage of South Carolina, York County specifically, and we have been talking about domestic violence, how it happens, some of the ways in which you can start to notice it, especially if you're watching a relationship or if you're in a relationship and you're wondering. I want you to be continuing to listen. Joan, share a little bit more about some of the ways in which domestic violence escalates and some of the signs and things to watch out for.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we know about domestic violence is that it always escalates in nature. It typically starts with things like verbal abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, these small controlling behaviors. And then it begins to escalate to things like a person punching a wall, throwing things, hitting other objects, but not you, but it's still sending a message, right? That could be you. And then it typically does escalate to it's you, hitting, pushing, shoving, punching, and at its worst, rape, strangulation, murder, using weapons on a person, stabbing them, shooting them, clubbing them, harming them in some way. Another thing that we were discussing is that domestic violence escalates during pregnancy. So again, back to relationship starts hot and heavy, a lot of times early on pregnancies within those relationships, which is another sign of control. Keeping someone pregnant is a type of control, and we recognize that under types of sexual violence. With contraception, they'll not have access to it, or keeping the woman pregnant so that you can't go out and work, so that you have to stay in the house. And also, if you have a child, you have to deal with me whether you like it or not for some years, right?
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times people will say that prior to pregnancy, they might experience things like the verbal abuse or the emotional abuse. But during pregnancy, often physical abuse, strangulation, kicking, shoving, hitting. And we often attribute this to the knowledge that the perpetrator has that for a woman, that child that she's carrying, they have a bond. And so who are you going to put your attention on once that child gets here? Me or it?
Uh-huh. Yep, it is a separation of, it's the understanding that they are losing control.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps for some women, if they're watching or listening, or if they've had a friend who thought they could maybe even save the relationship, it'll get better when they have children. What you're saying
No,
is for domestic violence, it's the opposite.
What I know about domestic violence is that those relationships do not get better. No amount of you trying to save them, no matter what, they just typically don't get better.
Mm-hmm.
What I do think could get better is if the person had some type of epiphany and is like, there's something wrong with me. Why am I behaving in this way? And they sought treatment specific to that, because there's specific treatment for perpetrators of domestic violence. It's not anger management. Anger management is you having road rage with a stranger.
Mm-hmm.
It is something different when you would put hands on the mother of your children. That is a totally separate thing. So they would have to get specialized treatment for that. And most people are not going to come to terms with that to begin with, let alone seek treatment for it.
Okay. So how can people get involved with Safe Passage? You've given a ton of information today. I've learned more as I continue to learn. I feel like the more you learn about domestic violence, it's like an onion, you can keep peeling it back. So tell us more about Safe Passage and how people can donate, get involved to volunteer and support the communities in which they serve.
Yes, so for domestic violence, Safe Passage serves York, Chester, and Lancaster counties. We are always looking for donors, be it financial or of your time, your energy, and your talents. If you can go to our website at www.safepassagesc.org and see more about our volunteer opportunities there. There's also a place on our website that allows you to donate. You can also do donations through your everyday purchases from Amazon. There is a component of Amazon called Amazon Smile, and Safe Passage is one of the charitable organizations that you can choose to send your donations to. In ways like that people can donate to us. We also have a residential office at Safe Passage where we have women, men, their children who are in dangerous situations. They come and stay with us. So we're always in need of things for a home. It's staffed 24/7, and the people live there. And so we always need toiletry items, for those people. Things that you need in a household, we always need them because our household is running 24/7 with a large amount of people.
Okay. Those are great ways to get involved, whether you are local to the South Carolina, York County area, or for those of you that are listening all across the continental United States and beyond. You can use Amazon as a way to make sure that you donate to Safe Passage by using the Amazon Smile donations. And Joan, I want you to know that I am for sure an advocate, a supporter, and want to continue to support Safe Passage any way that I can. So I thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Raushawna, and we appreciate your support so much and for giving us this platform to be able to educate our community.
Absolutely. We have to continue to do it. I believe it, because even what you shared today, as many conversations as we've had, there is still so much to learn. And you don't have to suffer in silence for any of the listeners out there. If this is you, if you need more help and support, I want to make sure that I give you a number that you can call. It's 24 hours manned. It's 803-329-2800. Again, that is 803-329-2800. If you are experiencing domestic violence, if you think you're experiencing it and you need to get some support, ask a question, call that number. So join us next time on Awesomeness in Action. We will be continuing the conversation around domestic violence with another special guest, because I'm committed to making sure that we pull the veil back and that we bring this to the forefront of humanity. There's a lot that happens with it. We know sex trafficking, fostering, all of these things affect our communities. And so we're going to keep talking about domestic violence all month long. Until then, you've been listening to Awesomeness in Action with WDRB Media and iHeartRadio. If you're interested in sponsoring or in getting involved for advertising, make sure you contact me at radio@giverofawesomeness.com. You can email me to find out more details. Until then, I will see you back next week, Saturdays at 3 p.m. right here on WDRB Media, the voice of the community. You've been listening to Awesomeness in Action with your host, me, Raushawna Price, giver of awesomeness. Until next time, remember, awesomeness is in you.